Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Today, we are going to talk about something very important in English grammar.
Oh, very important.
It's called the present continuous tense.
Okay.
This tense is all about actions that are happening right now as we speak.
So if you want to describe what you are doing at this very moment, you will need to use the present continuous tense.
Exactly. Are you ready to learn more about it?
Absolutely. It's a very useful tense, and it's not that difficult to learn once you understand the basic rules.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is the present continuous tense, and how is it different from other tenses?
Well, the present continuous tense is used to describe actions that are happening right now at this moment. It's like taking a picture of an action that is in progress.
Okay.
For example, if you are listening to this right now,
Yeah.
you can say, I am listening to this.
That makes sense. So the present continuous tense is all about what's happening right this second, not what happened in the past or what will happen in the future.
Exactly. It's about the present moment and the action that is ongoing.
So how do we form the present continuous tense? Are there any special rules we need to follow?
Yes, there are. The present continuous tense is formed with the subject, the be verb, and the ing form of the main verb.
Okay.
So the formula is subject plus be verb plus ing.
Okay, can you give me an example of this formula in action?
Sure, let's take the verb read. If you want to say that you were reading a book right now, you would say, I am reading a book.
Okay.
I is the subject, am is the be verb, and reading is the ing form of the verb read.
I see. So the ing ending is really important here. It tells us that the action is happening right now.
Precisely. It's the key ingredient that distinguishes the present continuous tense from other tenses.
So we add ing to the end of the verb. That sounds pretty easy.
Yeah.
But are there any exceptions to this rule?
Good question. Yes, there are a few spelling rules that we need to be aware of when adding ing to verbs.
Okay.
For example, if a verb ends in E, we usually drop the E before adding ing.
Okay.
So write becomes writing and dance becomes dancing.
Interesting. So it's not always as simple as just adding ing. We need to pay attention to the spelling of the verb as well.
Exactly. It's important to remember these spelling rules to make sure that your sentences are grammatically correct.
Okay, so we've covered the basic formula and some spelling rules. Now, I'm wondering, can we use any verb in the present continuous tense? Or are there some verbs that don't work with this tense?
That's a great question, actually. There are some verbs that we don't usually use in the present continuous tense. These verbs are called state verbs.
Okay, verbs.
They describe states of being or conditions rather than actions.
Can you give me some examples of state verbs?
Sure. Some common state verbs are believe, know, like love, need, want, understand, and so on.
Okay.
These verbs usually describe feeling, thoughts, or opinions rather than physical actions.
I see. So you wouldn't say, I am knowing the answer or she is wanting a new car. It just sounds strange.
Exactly. State verbs are usually used in the simple present tense, even when we are talking about something that is true at this moment. For example, you would say, I believe you not. I am believing you.
Okay, so we need to be careful about which verbs we use in the present continuous tense. It's best to stick to action verbs that describe physical actions.
That's right. If you're not sure whether a verb is an action verb or a state verb, you can always check a dictionary or a grammar book.
This is all starting to make sense. We've learned how to form the present continuous tense, and we've talked about the types of verbs that work well with this tense. But how do we use the present continuous tense in questions?
That's a great question, and it's actually quite simple. To form a question in the present continuous tense, we simply invert the subject and the be verb.
Okay.
So instead of saying he is playing tennis, we would ask, is he playing tennis?
So the word order changes when we ask a question that's good to know. Can you give me another example?
Sure. Let's say we want to ask someone what they're doing right now.
Okay.
You can say, what are you doing? What is the question where are is the be verb and you is the subject and doing is the ing form of the verb do.
I understand. So we put the be verb before the subject when we ask a question in the present continuous tense.
Exactly. That's the key difference between a statement and a question in this tense.
This is really helpful. I'm starting to feel more confident about using the present continuous tense. Now, what about negative sentences? How do we form those?
That's another important point. To form a negative sentence in the present continuous tense, we simply add the word not after the be verb.
Okay.
So instead of saying, I am watching TV, we would say, I am not watching TV.
So it's just like adding not to any other sentence with the be verb.
Exactly. It's the same rule for all tenses that use the be verb.
And just like with other tenses, we can use contractions to make the sentence sound more natural. So instead of saying, I am not watching TV, we could say, I'm not watching TV.
That's right. Using contractions is very common in spoken English. It makes your speech sound more fluent and natural.
This has been a great overview of the present continuous tense. We've covered a lot of ground, but I'm sure there's still more to learn. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
Yes, there is one more thing I would like to mention. The present continuous tense can also be used to talk about future plans or arrangements.
Future plans.
For example, if you were going to a party tomorrow, you could say, I am going to a party tomorrow.
Oh, that's interesting. So the present continuous tense can also be used to talk about things that are going to happen in the near future.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a versatile tense that can be used in a variety of situations.
I'm excited to learn more about this and other uses of the present continuous tense in our next segment. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of important information.
I agree. We've laid a good foundation for understanding this tense, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to put their new knowledge into practice.
Welcome back to our discussion of the present continuous tense. I am eager to learn more about this versatile tense and how it can be used in everyday conversations.
I am glad to hear that it is a very useful tense that can help you communicate more effectively in English.
In the previous segment, we talked about the basic structure of the present continuous tense and the types of verbs that can be used with it. Now, I would like to dive a little deeper and explore some of the more nuanced uses of this tense.
That sounds like a great plan. Let's start by talking about how the present continuous tense can be used to describe temporary situations.
Temporary situations. What do you mean by that?
I mean situations that are happening now but are not permanent. For example, if you are staying at a hotel for a few days, you can say, I am staying at a hotel. This sentence implies that you are not living at the hotel permanently, but only for a short period of time.
I see. So the present continuous tense can be used to emphasize the temporary nature of an action.
Exactly. It's a way of saying that something is happening now, but it won't last forever.
Can you give me another example of this?
Sure. Let's say you're working on a project at work. You can say, I am working on a project. This sentence implies that the project is not your permanent job, but only something that you are doing for a limited time.
That makes sense. So the present continuous tense can be used to talk about temporary jobs, situations, or even moods.
Precisely. It's a very flexible tense that can be adapted to many different contexts.
This is really interesting. I never realized how much information could be conveyed by using the present continuous tense.
It's a powerful tool that can add a lot of nuance to your language.
Now, I am curious about how the present continuous tense can be used to talk about future plans. We touched on this briefly in the last segment, but I would like to explore it in more detail.
Of course, as we mentioned earlier, the present continuous tense can be used to talk about things that are going to happen in the near future. This is especially common when we are talking about fixed arrangements or plans that have already been made.
Can you give me some examples of this?
Sure. Let's say you have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. You can say, I'm seeing the doctor tomorrow. This sentence implies that the appointment is already scheduled and that you are definitely going.
Okay, so it's not just a vague intention. It's a firm plan that has already been made.
Exactly. It's a way of saying that something is definitely going to happen in the future.
Can you give me another example?
Sure. Let's say you are going on vacation next week. You can say, I'm going to Hawaii next week. This sentence implies that you have already booked your flights and accommodation and that you are excited about your trip.
I see. So the present continuous tense can be used to express excitement or anticipation about future plans.
That's right. It's a way of saying that you are looking forward to something.
This is really helpful.
Yeah.
I am starting to see how the present continuous tense can be used to create a sense of immediacy and anticipation in my speech.
That's great to hear. The more you practice using this tense, the more natural it will become.
Now, I'm wondering, are there any other interesting uses of the present continuous tense that we haven't covered yet?
Yes. There is one more use that I would like to mention. The present continuous tense can also be used to describe trends or changes that are happening over time.
Trends or changes. What do you mean by that?
I mean, things that are gradually increasing, decreasing, or evolving. For example, if the price of gas is going up, you can say the price of gas is increasing. This sentence implies that the price is not fixed, but is constantly changing.
Okay, so the present continuous tense can be used to describe things that are in a state of flux.
Exactly. It's a way of saying that something is not static, but is dynamic and ever-changing.
Can you give me another example?
Sure. Let's say the population of a city is growing. You can say the population of the city is growing. This sentence implies that the population is not constant, but is increasing over time.
That makes sense. So the present continuous tense can be used to talk about any kind of trend or change that is happening over time.
Precisely, it's a very versatile tense that can be used to describe a wide range of situations.
This has been a very enlightening discussion. I am feeling much more confident about my understanding of the present continuous tense and its many uses.
That is wonderful to hear. Remember, practice makes perfect. The more you use this tense in your everyday conversations and writing, the more comfortable you will become.
I am definitely going to make an effort to use the present continuous tense more often. I am excited to see how it can help me communicate more effectively in English.
I am sure you will be impressed with the results. It is a valuable tool that can enhance your fluency and expressiveness.
Before we wrap up this segment, I would like to ask you one more question. Are there any common mistakes that people make when using the present continuous tense?
That's a great question. Yes, there are a few common mistakes that people make. One common mistake is using the present continuous tense with state verbs, as we discussed earlier. State verbs are not usually used in the continuous form. So instead of saying, I am loving this song, you should say, I love this song.
Right. It's important to remember the difference between action verbs and state verbs.
Exactly. Another common mistake is forgetting to use the ing ending on the verb. This is a simple mistake, but it can make your sentences grammatically incorrect. So always double check your sentences to make sure that you have used the correct form of the verb.
Thanks for pointing that out. It's easy to make careless mistakes when you are learning a new language.
That's true. But with practice and attention to detail, you can avoid these common errors and become a more confident and fluent English speaker.
This has been an incredibly informative discussion.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a much better grasp of the present continuous tense and how to use it correctly.
I'm glad to hear that it is my pleasure to share my knowledge of English grammar with you.
I am eager to continue our exploration of the present continuous tense in our next segment, but for now, I think we have covered a lot of ground, and our listeners may need some time to digest all this information.
I agree. It is always good to take a break and let the information sink in. We will be back soon with more insights and examples of the present continuous tense in action.
Welcome back to our conversation about the present continuous tense. I am so glad you are still with us.
Me too. It's been a very enjoyable and informative discussion.
We have covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to learn about this amazing tense.
Absolutely. The present continuous tense is a very versatile and expressive tense that can be used in many different ways.
In this final segment, I would like to focus on how we can use the present continuous tense to make our English sound more natural and fluent.
That sounds like a great idea. Fluency is all about using language smoothly and confidently, and the present continuous tense can definitely help with that.
One way to improve our fluency is to use contractions whenever possible. For example, instead of saying I am reading a book, we can say I'm reading a book.
That's right. Contractions are very common in spoken English, and they can help you sound more relaxed and natural.
Another way to improve our fluency is to pay attention to our intonation and rhythm when we speak.
That's a very important point. The way we say things can have a big impact on how we are understood when we use the present continuous tense. We should try to emphasize the being ending. This will help to make our speech sound more dynamic and engaging.
I see. So it's not just about using the correct grammar, it's also about using the right intonation and rhythm.
Exactly. The present continuous tense is all about action and movement, so our speech should reflect that.
Can you give me an example of how intonation can change the meaning of a sentence?
Sure, let's take the sentence. She is working on a project. If we say this sentence with a flat intonation, it sounds like a simple statement of fact. But if we say it with a rising intonation, it sounds like we are asking a question.
That's interesting. So intonation can really change the way a sentence is interpreted.
It certainly can. That's why it's so important to pay attention to our intonation when we speak English.
Now, I'm wondering, are there any other tips or tricks that can help us use the present continuous tense more effectively?
Yes, there are. One useful tip is to listen to how native English speakers use the present continuous tense in everyday conversations.
That's a great idea. We can learn a lot by observing how others use language.
Exactly. Pay attention to the situations in which native speakers use the present continuous tense and try to imitate their intonation and rhythm.
Another tip is to practice using the present continuous tense in our own conversations.
That's the best way to improve our fluency. The more we practice, the more natural it will become.
I'm definitely going to make an effort to use the present continuous tense more often in my conversations.
I encourage you to do so. It is a powerful tool that can help you communicate more effectively in English.
Well, I think we have covered just about everything there is to know about the present continuous tense.
We have certainly covered a lot of ground. I hope our listeners are feeling more confident about using this tense in their own English conversations.
I am sure they are. We've learned how to form the present continuous tense, how to use it in different situations, and how to make it sound more natural and fluent.
It has been a very enjoyable and rewarding experience sharing our knowledge of this tense with you.
I agree. It is always a pleasure to talk about English grammar.
We hope you will join us again next time for another fascinating topic.
Until then, keep practicing and keep exploring. And to all our amazing friends of the show, we would love for you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. Also, be sure to check out the links in the description for more great resources. Have a fantastic day